right, Jolyon, thank you very much for joining us. We just met actually for the first time at the UK Film Festival. It was really, really cool. It was a great environment, but you weren't there to be normally part of the festival. You actually were part of the festival last year. So can you talk about what your journey was and get to your film while we're on it?
Thanks for having me.
No worries.
I'm actually kind of an art director by trade, sort of a creative in the advertising industry, and have been for the last 10 years. I've sort of worked at some quite sort of decent ad agencies, one called Mother. I actually did a stint at Channel 4, and ended up sort of working on the Paralympics campaign when I was there. And then I went to Wieden Kennedy and worked on Nike, Lurpak and things like that. And in the background, I kind of had this sort of dream to be a sort of writer-director, as I'm sure lots of people do. And I hadn't written a script before, other than sort of ad scripts and things like that. And I basically, like I said, was my first attempt at writing a script. And I sort of came up to the idea based on the fact of I'd been stuck on a phone call for many hours, getting very frustrated at people. And
I mean, Broadband seems to be particularly bad, right?
Really bad.
Actually, give us a quick premise of your film.
Jumped the gun, yeah.
Give us a quick premise of your short film.
So basically, this is a man who he gets on the phone, tries to cancel his broadband, and the broadband provider has a sort of different thing up their sleeve, and they basically end up blackmailing them. I can say more.
No, don't say too much. Don't say too much else. It's worth watching. So you had this idea and you decided to write a script. Where'd you go from?
So I think that I've read a lot of scripts. Actually, I think that was my best bit of advice. Was someone said read scripts, and I think I was really sort of thorough with that. I sort of looked up, and you can pretty much find any script online now. So I sort of went through it, and I sort of built this sort of bucket list of scripts to read, and I started to understand how the script format would work and where things go and the beats you want to hit. And I started to really understand sort of how to sort of formalize something. And I watched a lot of short films, and I sort of knew what I liked, and I sort of started to see a bit of a pattern where you can sort of, short film's is not like a lot of other films. It's in some ways a short film is its own art. Not all short films, but it's something that has sort of the ones that you remember and the ones that tend to do well on awards and tend to do things have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. I know that sounds obvious, and a lot of stories do, but then I found like the ones that were sort of more not indulgent, but the ones that were sort of more sort of vague and the ones that didn't really have a sort of full conclusion, which is things like that. They were great, but they weren't necessarily the ones that I wanted something quite compact with my short film. I want people to sort of get everything out of this film and in one hit. And it's and I think once long story short, once I came to I'd basically been the story came from my reality, basically of just phoning up to try to cancel my broadband and being faced with these very sort of robotic people on the phone, and I felt like they didn't share any sort of sense of empathy or anything. To the point where I didn't know what it was, but there's not many things in life which make me that angry. But I used to get so angry, like my blood was boiling, like instantly, and I don't know what it was. I was almost became the worst version of myself on those phone calls, because I was just felt like I'd been wasting hours and hours of my time, and also I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. And I think it hit me when this was happening, with this moment was like, well, in this world that we live in of sort of privacy issues and things like that, your broadband provider probably knows a lot more about us than they should. And I started to sort of unpick that a bit, and I thought to myself, this is really interesting, because this is like the shift of power. I thought was really fun to play with. It was like, you're phoning up as you're the innocent one trying to cancel your broadband, and you're being sort of ignored, or you're being sort of made to wait, or whatever the sort of elongated process is. It's a torturous process in some ways. And I just thought that it was very interesting to sort of shift the power, basically. And when I initially had the idea, I was thinking of this idea of using almost like a split screen pendulum, where you almost shift the power to one side. Got too complicated. Didn't need it in the end. But at the same time, that was very much like the core of the idea was just about really trying to understand who was the villain and who was the hero. And I think what happens is who you start to think is the hero or who you start to think is the villain, everything kind of twists. And at the end, you kind of don't know who to side with. You're like, there's no good. Like there's really no good. Like each and every one of them has their own thing. And I think that was one thing that I really, really wanted to get to, was basically get to a thing where you were left quite dissatisfied with who was the villain and who was the thing. Because I think I like that kind of, it's sort of almost a Black Mirror-esque kind of feeling where you're like, you really don't know who to side with, which I thought was important.
So you submitted the script to the UK Film Festival and ended up
winning it. Yes.
Yeah. So this was last year.
This was last year. Yeah.
Right.
Ended up winning it. Again, a bit of a shock considering it was the first script I've ever written, but I was like, again, I felt that it was. I think that I was kind of actually looking, by using the awards, I was looking at it as a validation, basically, because I was like, is this good? I think this is good. Is this actually any good? And when it won, and then it won a few other film festivals for just the scripts alone, I was like, I started to sort of build my confidence in it. I was like, oh, maybe this is really good. And then lockdown hit, and we basically, me and my brothers decided to start a creative ad agency and production company based on many frustrations within the industry. And we got chatting to Murray, who's the head of the UK Film Festival, and he was so blown away by the script that he was like, I want to help you make it. So he sort of exec produced it, helped us find some talent, and he was instrumental in making it happen, really. And I think it was a kind of without Murray it would have been a bit of a probably wouldn't have happened, because he was really sort of a driver behind it. And I think that was kind of the sort of the story. And we just ended up shooting it and it was sort of in November last year, so about a year ago. About a year ago, and it's been sort of on the awards circuit ever since that, and sort of I think it's nearly got 30 awards now.
Nice. So wow.
Sort of did well and did well in some, and then got into the Bolton Film Festival and things like that for like the BAFTA qualifying stuff. So did all the things that I was hoping my first short film would do.
Nice.
And, so it has been a bit of a dream ride, to be honest.
So talk me through the making of it. It's a very contained setting. So how did you go about filming it? What was your how long did it take you? How much did you actually spend on it?
Sure.
And I'd like to also find out how much you spent going to festivals and sending the film to festivals.
Good question. So when I wrote it, I was deliberately writing it to shoot it, because I was thinking to myself, this isn't this isn't a script I want to give to another director. This is something I want to direct. And so the whole time I was thinking, how would I do this? How would I do this? This is going to be self-funded. How is it going to actually come to life? And so I really did write it as it would be 2 setups, and that would be effectively it. And with sort of cutting and some clever lighting, it feels a bit bigger than that, but effectively all it is just those two scenes, and but just done in different ways. And it's all shot in one living room. Even the office bit, we just made a little office within the living kitchen area. And we shot it
built like this cubicle type situation.
Exactly. Cubicle, changed the lighting and made it feel really different. And it was sort of very cold. The whole idea was that she was in that very cold environment, he was in a very warm environment, so that kind of helped give us that difference. Shot it all in one day, and it was self-funded, pulled a lot of favors. So it's really weird when people ask how much it costs to make. It's like, realistically, it's I don't know.
Well, put it this way: how much, including favors, how much cash did you spend?
How much cash? Probably about $3,500. But
that's good.
Yeah, it was good. But I would say that there was some serious favors pulled. I would say if we hadn't had the contacts and the sort of, I think actually a big thing was like the script itself, because it had won the awards, it was amazing how many people gravitated towards it. So it was like we could pull favors more so than I ever expected. And all the actors worked for nothing. They all worked because they loved the script. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that would be something that would happen. I actually thought that most people, it would be a bit of a slog for the stuff. But the moment you told them, it was basically, I think it was almost like that became the hook. People would go, oh, there's an award-winning script here, that would make them read it. Now, I never sort of anticipated people to take the time and go to the effort to reading them, even though it's a short script. I just thought, actually, why would you? But because it had that little hook, they read it. When they read it, they loved it, and then they was almost like jumping at it. Yeah, and I think that was a big thing. So I think next time we do something, another short or another film, it's how we package it up to even present to crew, to present to actors, like, is massive, because it really, you know, it does obviously help. Now we've got this one under our belt and we can go forward with that. But at the same time, I think that was a key, and I think that those kind of favors, I think, especially with all my sort of industry contacts in that world, that was what I think if we were doing it realistically, I don't think we would have done it for less than 15K.
Right. If you had to pay people.
If we had to pay people, and it was, you know, when we didn't manage to pull some absolute crazy sort of freebies and things like that, and our location was pretty much for free, and things like that, where normally, you know how much locations
cost.
Of
course it did. Especially in London.
Exactly. So I would say that, like, I think we made a 15K thing for about 3.5, but I would say that, you know, there was some some big favors pulled.
How much did you spend sending to festivals? Because you said you've been to 30, which means you probably spent a bit submitting.
Yeah, no, so I was very I did a lot of tactics to try and find the right festivals for this film. I wasn't just blindly going in, because I think if you do that, then you are going to be spending heaps of money. I don't think I spent more than 500 quid on everything we did. We were very clever. I got
mostly British festivals?
No. I did quite. I can tell you. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there was a few like monthly ones. Right. I basically started off with a few monthly ones to try and like almost again build a bit of validation. Yeah. Or if I win these, maybe they'll win the other ones. And so I did that first. They won. Then I won like the Paris Film Festival, this other film festival, and a few other things got picked up by a few other really kind of interesting like film shortage and stuff like that. I was like, okay, this is doing well. I'll enter some more of the things. But I don't think I ever spent more than sort of 35 to 50 quid on any awards entry. I had a film three-way kind of subscription, which took off a 30% or something. So that helps overall. But I was just, you know, I did a lot of, tried to do a lot of the smaller ones that felt right for this script. Yeah. And like, you know, it's only a sort of 6.5 minute short or 6 minute short. So it's not, you know, there are some nice categories for that, under 10 minutes, this and that. So I think I was just very clever with what I picked, and I kind of saw what else had been done, and I sort of measured myself up and thought, can this compete with that? Yeah. And, you know, obviously I think some of the bigger festivals, I think I probably lost out if you look at it like as a transactional point of view. And I sort of, you know, I entered 4 or 5 of the big ones, and only got into the Bolton one, and that's fine. That's, you know, but those happens, and it's not right for everyone. But then, you know, things like there's the Edinburgh Fringe night festival, which is again like one I hadn't heard of, but I saw on someone else's short they had. Again, that was where I found the ones. I found shorts that were similar to mine. Yeah. I found all the laurels that they had entered and won, and sent it to those. And I thought to myself, well, if this has done well before, maybe this would do well. And it did. And it ended up either winning or you're getting silver or bronze across the board. And so that it's kind of, I didn't, you know, as much as I got an award for 30 of them, whether it winning them completely all out or getting a silver, bronze or whatever. Yeah. But I don't think we entered more than like 40. So in terms of a ratio of success, it was not bad.
But let me ask you one thing. Did you budget for how much it would cost you, or did you just sort of, because I've never met a filmmaker that actually budgeted for it?
No, not at all. And to be honest, I was winging it, and I was entering awards left, right, and centre. I didn't just do one big hit. I was kind of like building on it, and then I was kind of getting more and more confident, and if, you know, I missed out on some really good ones. I will kind of pinch myself of it would be nice to have entered that, but the deadlines were missed and the thing. And if I got my shit together,
no, you can curse here. It's fine.
Okay, fine.
So it's kids don't watch this.
Yeah, sorry, kids.
So you don't ever, you know.
Don't get into filmmaking.
Exactly. Forget about it. No. Well, we have to mark it's not for kids on YouTube, so might as well. Fuck it. So because that's been my experience, is that I mean, I certainly never really budgeted for how much money it costs to send to festivals, let alone go to them. No. You know what I mean? So once you actually enter and you get in, you have to decide whether you're going to go, because it's going to cost you.
So I think this is quite a nice, for the first time of entering film festivals in general, was because of COVID and because of everything, I was never planning on going to many of them, and if so, I was going to go because of COVID, right? And I thought, I also thought there was nothing that, even if I was to win X, Y, and Z, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have gone out there because it would have been too much of a risk at the time and blah, 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 blah. But equally, I think we did go to some of the London-based ones and like the Wimbledon Short Festival and a few others. But I kind of knew I'd won. So that again, if I knew I'm going to win, it was another thing to go to. And I think with the bigger ones in America and things like that, I think I'll save that for another time, and definitely that will be part of whether I budget for that next time. You probably will forget and just overlook it and rather spend the money on the actual film. But as most directors will probably want to do, or producers. But
that's the thing. It's like our instinct is to put it on camera.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, like we'll worry about that after.
Yeah, exactly.
Except it's how people see it. You should kind of think about it. Yeah, it's true. So now that it's been to a few festivals, do you have any online viral marketing things that you think? I mean, you're an ad agency, right? So you've got to be thinking about this a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think we were. It's a tough one because it's like this is the first of many that we're going to be making. I think we're going to be. This is kind of whet our appetite a bit, and I think part of me goes, do I invest in sort of putting this one out there, or do I just invest in the next film? And so part of us sort of going is, yes, we can come up with some clever ideas and put it out there, and we'll do a press release and we'll send it out and we'll sort of celebrate the fact it's won awards and instead of doing something specifically. I'm kind of want to focus on the next one and writing the next one and the next sort of the next 3, the next 5, whatever. But I think in terms of just getting this one out there, this one was more proof of concept, if you like, that we can do it and we can do it well. And then now it's a case of what's the bigger next thing? What's the how do we get more budget? How do we do more things? How do we do more locations? How do we do pull more favors and things like that? So I think that's the next step, really.
I mean, considering the subject matter of the film about quitting broadband, which pretty much everybody who has a house has gone through at least once or a version of,
especially in COVID.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think I'm wondering if there isn't a potential for a viral clip-based Snapchat.
Yeah, you might be right.
Maybe Snapchat, not but TikTok and whatever.
Yeah, you might be right.
To have like these little sound bites to enter the cultural zeitgeist, because the topic is cultural zeitgeist. So
it'd be nice to sort of link it back to a specific provider maybe as well, and like.
Well, we're not going to trash any providers on this program. They might.
I promise you, it's definitely not Virgin Media. Okay.
It's not Virgin. Virgin is not the reason why we're
definitely not Virgin.
It's definitely not Virgin.
I definitely don't have Virgin Media, and yeah, exactly. But yeah,
it's not Virgin.
Sure.
The crazy thing is, like, just watching that, I mean, of course it felt incredibly familiar, the topic of it, but also, I always wonder why a company would engage in making your customers, even if they leave, unhappy. Because if I look at one of the most sort of contentious switching things that we have in our days is switching phones. And so if you were to go from Apple to Android, or vice versa, that's sort of a big deal, right? But they both let you do it. Apple doesn't just sit there and go, no, you can't have any of my shit, because I know it's your shit, but you can't have any of my stuff. Do you know what I mean? They don't just hold it for you. In fact, they say, are you transferring to Android? And vice versa, because they want you to come back.
It's a fluid world. Like we will often flip, you want to create an environment where you can switch between the, you're
exactly.
Right.
And so I don't understand why, as a brand, speaking from advertising, as a brand, you'd want to have this perception that you're being held hostage by it.
Hold hostage, being held ransom.
It's I don't understand the logic behind it. I mean, I get don't make it easy for the customer to leave.
Yeah.
But don't just.
But you want a good breakup, don't you? You want
exactly.
You don't want it. The worst thing you can sort of preemptively go into something is like having anxiety because you're going to have a sort of an argument with someone on the phone, like about.
And then you're stuck with them anyway. I was like, why? So now I'm unhappy in relationship with you.
Yeah, great.
So I'm definitely, if I do quit, definitely want to come back now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and because Virgin in this case is multiple brands. you know, like it's a negative association. I find like it's a really weird thing. You know,
it's funny, and it's like it's just even the sort of breaking up analogy is quite funny about like taking your stuff with you and stuff like that. And I remember once I did switch, eventually sort of got the courage up and did make the switch. And the previous broadband provider actually messaged me like 3 months later saying, "Oh, could you send us your router, the hub?" Because the thing, and I was like, no. I was like, you made my life so hard. Like, why would I send it to you now? It's like, and it was like one of those funny things. I actually, to be honest, I binned it anyway previously before that. But, like, why would I keep my old provider, my old ex's stuff?
It's like that's the ex's stuff. I don't want to have it anymore. I'm going to throw it out the window.
Exactly.
So what's next for you? Do you have another film that you're working on? Or are you looking for films to work on? Are you looking for writers to send you stuff?
There's two elements to this. Yeah, definitely. From my own selfish point of view, I'm definitely continuing the writing and directing side of stuff that I want to do. I would love to actually direct something someone else has written. I think it would be a really interesting challenge because I'm a bit of a control freak, and I wonder how much of I'd have to find the right partner to do that with. I've just recently finished doing it is a sort of 3-part short film. I've done the first part. But it's based on a music video. So a band came to us who I've worked with in the past, and they said, we've got sort of a bit of money to make a music video. And I was like, I don't really want to make a music video. I love making music videos, don't get me wrong, but at the same time I was like, let's do something different. And I said, and I just coming off the back of, like I said, and I was like, why don't we do a short film? And they were like, what do you mean, why don't we do a short film? I was like, well, just do, instead of the music video, we do a short film that features your music. And it's like, it's not like, a revolutionary thing, but for them it was like, that sounds cool. And I was like, yeah. So instead of us marketing it as a music video, you get to market it as a short film. You get a short film poster. We enter, which at film festivals, we do that instead of entering music video festivals.
Yeah.
And so pitched them an idea for a script, and I worked with some of the band members to sort of shape that a bit. And we've shot that now. I need to shoot part 2 and part 3 in sort of January, February. Need to write part 2 and part 3.
Right.
But it was a really interesting sort of take on stuff, a different thing. It was about long story. I won't go into too much depth, but it's about. I love this idea about introverts and extroverts, and they say about how it's very difficult for introverts to be. There's like some statistics about that introverts actually won't be as successful as extroverts, and if you're introverted, you can never reach the top of your game.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of stats to prove that, and I thought it was really interesting because it's like there must be so many introverts out there who haven't had a chance to make it as an extrovert because it's literally just not inside them. So I tried to throw that on the head. So I created this film where it's almost like a therapy group where introverts go to be turned into extroverts.
Right.
So it's the opener is just two people screaming at each other, and it just sort of goes into some really weird kind of odd kind of, again, Black Mirror-esque kind of therapy moments, and it's sort of in this kind of facility and things like that. And that was really nice. And then part 2 and part 3 basically going to be telling the same story that happens in part 1, but told from very different angles. So the second part will be told from the perspective of as if this was I can't go to that. But it comes at it in a very, very different way, and I think it's quite exciting because again, it's quite a big comment on society. So the only borrowings are probably the commentary from, like I said, as in like that was really interesting. Like I said, actually doing some flipping around, but was the twist at the end with when the employee of the month appear. That to me was like, that came in the process of actually production, because it wasn't actually in the original script. It was more of an open ending where you sort of weren't sure if she things that, and this just became like the nail in the head for me and everything. But it also said to me that who's the villain, who's in control, and it reminded me of like she's just doing her job. Yeah. And to do her job well, she has to find the ways of keeping you. Yeah. And however far that sort of stretches, I thought was really interesting. And someone reminded me very similarly is as if parking ticket people. Yeah. I don't know what they're called, parking ticket people. But everyone hates them, right? Yeah. And it's the thing. So they're just doing their job. And yes, if they give more tickets, they're doing better at their job because they're being more thorough. you can't be angry at those guys for doing it, because our society is making that part of it. You think their job. And so I've always laughed, I've got tickets before and got really angry and things like that. But the truth is, I really don't blame them, because it's like, you can't, right? It's not their fault. It's got to be society's fault. And I think that's the bigger thing. So rewinding back to that thing, the bigger point is that with this other film, the comments on society, I think that's starting to be where, because I didn't know what kind of filmmaker I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think the more I feel like it is, the more I want to be like making some sort of comment or some sort of dig at society for whatever reason, and whether it's society's great or society's not so great. I want to be able to sort of at least make people think a bit more about stuff, and like, so that where my sort of, I don't know, where my style might go, I'm not sure. And this style is dramatically different to what, like I said, was much more sort of a real look at someone's sort of phone call and a moment in time. This is I've much more got into sort of like the Greek weird wave style, where everything's a bit more
absurd and,
exactly, and a bit more sort of robotic almost, and the sort of everything's a bit kind of strange and weird and lovely, and I love where my sort of style leads. But there's still the same sort of theme of who's wrong, who's right, is this society's fault, it's all that kind of stuff, and I really like that. That's the stuff that gets me excited. But
you seem to be working quite a bit with family. I noticed a lot of family present at the festival. Talk about your relationship with your family, who's part of it, who's more or less part of it.
Sure.
Tell me a bit about that.
Sure. So basically, it's I have three brothers. We're all sort of very weirdly similar in what we do. We're all sort of in the creative industry in some format. The eldest brother is an actor. Actually, he wasn't in the film, but he was involved with casting and things like that. And then the other brother, George, the second eldest brother, he produced the film. And then there's the youngest brother who did the music and the composing and the sound design. And again, it couldn't have done it without them. They're all kind of been sort of heavily integral in it. Especially, the production side of it was sort of a bit of magic, like considering it was our first production into the world of film, and we've done the adverts before, but this was a different sort of beast in some ways. But the big thing that was sort of was quite amazing was Dominic's composition, and I think in that, like, again, we sort of very much we're trying to be inspired by that Greek weird world in actually the music in some ways, and that thing of being quite poignant and quite sort of, there was some nice classical instrumentation and some nice bits. But again, almost what I loved about it was adding this sort of gravity to quite a mundane situation, like being on the phone, walking around the kitchen. It's not that thing, but adding strings and some different sort of offbeat notes and things like that, you start to really build a sort of tension and a sort of elevation. I think I was basically long story again, ramble, part of me happens. But no, I think so Dominic's music was like an integral part of that film, and it's clear, like, when a lot of people comment on it after, they said, love the film, but music was wow. And I think that was always the ambition, and I think he's just very talented. He's annoyingly very talented. But yeah, it's a weird one being brothers. Like, again, it's that relationship of first time he did a pass on the music, I was like, I don't like it, Dom. I was like, I'm sorry, don't like it. And he was like, yeah, okay, all right, I'll go away. And because we have, like, there's no, like with family, you can swear and shout at them and call them horrible things, and then you're hugging the next day. Like, you very rarely, I think we have that kind of innate thing where we're not afraid of calling people out. There's nothing, we're not sort of, we have that ability just to be like, shit, that's really shit. And then they turn around and they're like, sometimes they do, they say, yeah, what do you know? Fuck you. Right. But sometimes, all the time, we end up getting to somewhere really interesting, because we're not sort of worried about each other's, like, not feelings. It's what we care about some feelings, but at the same time, we have a sort of ability to be able to just, like,
be blunt and be honest.
Yeah, there's nothing to hide from. We're not, like, precious about anything.
Yeah,
and we're often like that on set, and it's like, we can almost, like, speak to each other. Me and George have this quite amazing ability to have conversations without talking.
Yeah,
and because we're brothers, he knows what I need when I need it. And from a directing point of view, it's amazing because you just suddenly you go, I don't have to ask questions. He's like, here you go.
Yeah.
And you don't get that very often. And I think that is just a family thing. And I've never felt that with anyone else in a working environment. It's very difficult.
It's a shorthand.
And I honestly don't think we would be able to do what we're doing with 10 Days as an advertising agency and production company. But B, we definitely wouldn't be able to do a short film if we didn't have that. And that ability just to be able to just be like, and George looks at me and we often do everything quite nimbly and we do everything quite small teams wherever we can. But in terms of him being almost like a first AD, even though sometimes we have a first AD, sometimes we don't, whatever, however we're doing it with the crew and whatever, he looks at me and he's like, have you got it? He's like going, have you got it? And he'll do anything he can to make sure we get that shot or get that thing, even if we know people are screaming saying, we've got no money, we've got no time, all the kind of things that you happen on the shoot. And he'll look at me and he's like, you sure? And I think even not a first AD can really do that because their job is just to get shit moving and get it done. And he'll often just sort of like, he'll know when I haven't got it as well because I have this look on my face. I don't hide my feelings. And then when I'm happy and I got it, he'll be like, you got it. So
how do other people in the collaborative process fit into this brotherly dynamic? Because that sure is. It sounds like an overwhelming thing, and so when other people have to step into that, how are they able to, or how much do you have to look outwards in order to make sure they are part?
Yeah, I think the first few shoots we did from an advertising perspective, was we were very sort of like insular in what we would do. Like it was very sort of like everyone was like, I don't know what I'm doing because you guys are doing everything and not talking about it. We learned a lot from the first few shoots of, okay, we've got to communicate better because we're having like these little like, sort of telepathic conversations and everyone else is just literally going, I'm not sure what you want. And then like, we're like, yeah, but you know what gets in my head.
Yeah, of course.
They don't. And I think since then I think we definitely have a tight understanding between us, and I think now and I think like I said was actually a really good sort of test for that as well, because I think it opened up our mind to say yes, we know we've got that between us, but equally how important collaboration is. And I think actually having Murray being involved as well was like super amazing because it allowed for us to have that kind of other person who invested into the script and invested into he really wanted this to succeed, and so he was almost a lot of the time he was either sort of pushing us in a different direction than we may have gone, and that we were allowing that collaboration because he was so close to it. And I think normally we're quite protective, but then on set, like we've been renowned for having very sort of family vibes. Like a lot of people say like, oh, it's not like other sets where there's no wankers, there's no horrible people sort of being sort of demanding and sort of this. We don't do that. Like we don't have first ADs who shout. We deliberately have people. Generally, everyone's quite nice, and we've filtered out the people who aren't. And we don't work with them. And it's been as you do in a naturally kind of thing. But we're pretty much from the get go. We've been trying to create an anti-normal, because I've been on so many film sets before when you've got huge budgets, massive crews. And it's not to say people are not nice. It's just to say that people are all focused on doing their job. They don't really know who's who. You're all meeting on this one day to do this thing. Everyone's got this kind of sort of thing. So you can feel very lonely on a big set. Yeah. And I think we're deliberate to, I go around and I make sure I introduce myself to everyone, shake their hands. I'm probably not COVID now, but
right. Fist bumps,
yeah, elbow shakes, but definitely just try and make an introduction and try and make sure that there's no sort of, oh, I can't talk to this person, can't talk to that person, and we create quite a close environment, and I guess that's the learnings from being family. And I think I would say we try and create a family atmosphere on set. And in terms of our communication, we definitely still work on it, but there is a channel between us that no one else is going to really get into, because that channel is the sort of thing that makes us. You know what I mean? It makes us a bit.
Were you mischief brothers as kids, or were you the good? We listen to everything that dad says or mom says.
Yeah, that's a good point. We fought a lot. Like we loved
between you guys.
Yeah, but not like it was like we were really into wrestling.
Right.
Like everything was like about
the rough and tumble type.
Oh yeah. Right. Well, because the youngest one is 6'8", so he
oh my god, yeah, of course. I've met all of your brothers. They're
massive. And but he wasn't always 6'8". He was a bit. I was always a bit bigger than him until he shot out. But yeah, we used to like set up like, we'd have these mats in the garden. We'd set up like ropes, and we'd really go like we'd buy had like the wrestling belts that from Toys R Us. And we just have lots of fun, break lots of things, and accidentally, of course, but the sort of fake ladder matches we would try and replicate in our living room.
Of course.
But
So is wrestling still part of the
to come and work with us, you have to have a wrestling.
Less so part of the creative process, but at least part of your sort of enjoyment. You watch it at all?
No, not anymore. It was really just like a growing up phase, and then we saw, kids is like WWF or whatever. It's amazing, like just like seeing all that stuff. And
it's a good show.
It is a good show.
Yeah.
Like, we used to stay up and watch SmackDown and all that kind of stuff, and Friday Late Night Raw and all this kind of. It was like SummerSlam and all. It was like you had those nice like memories of stuff. Even though looking back, I'm not sure I necessarily encourage my kids to sort of just watch wrestling, but you never know.
If there's lots of boys around, you have 2 kids, right?
I have 2 kids, yeah. So I've got a 2-year-old girl and a 6-week-old boy.
Okay, well, there's going to be a lot of wrestling, for sure.
Yeah, not yet. He's too little for that, but we'll see.
Well, is there anything? If you could point to one big lesson you learned in this since you decided to start writing and since you've made the script into a film, you could point to one lesson, something that changed your mind about something significantly. What could you point to?
I think the biggest thing I've learned is like and I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, is I was seeking validation and to see if what I was doing was good before I put in more time of that. And I think I wasted a lot of time by trying to seek validation. And I think you kind of have to just get on and do stuff. And I was like, I probably wasted like but at least I'm not saying I could have. I should have made this film 10 years ago, whether it had been poignant as this film. But I should have made my first film 10 years ago. But I had this belief in myself that what gives me the right to make a film when I haven't had any experience or I haven't had what I think. And I think that's the biggest lesson, is just go and make stuff. Because that's my big, genuinely, like, I don't, try not to regret anything and all those kind of cliches.
But you do.
You do. And my biggest regret is I didn't just make stuff. Like I always wanted to. I knew from like, I don't know, 13 years old, I loved film. Like I knew I loved it. Never touched making films. Like it just never, like I never felt like I could. And I don't know why. It was like some sort of restriction on me where it was like, I almost felt like, again, what gives me the kind of right, I could happily take photos on a camera and things like that, but actually making a film, I just maybe I was scared of failure. Maybe I was actually scared that I would make something really crap and then that would be the end of that. But actually, if I had made something crap at like 13, you just make another one.
Exactly.
And I think that's the beauty of what I've learned now, is that it's not that I'm going to be less precious about stuff. I'm not going to spend time overthinking it, and I'm just going to get on and start making it. And we do this thing where we with a lot of our ads, and we're trying to do it more and more. So we make these things like like animatics, right?
Yeah.
But we call it a crap-o-matic.
Right.
And we basically it's literally us just replicating the ad in our living room or whatever, or in our office or whatever.
Yeah.
And it looks awful and things like this, but you really get a sense of what it will feel like, and it helps make the shoot much easier. And again, I think nothing stops you doing that. So if you're worried about validation thing, do a test. Find out if that's going to work. And if you're kind of like, well, this is kind of interesting.
Now that your phone is whatever the quality that it is, you've got no excuses.
Yeah,
the tech is there.
Exactly. And I think that's like a big thing. It's just like if you write something, it doesn't even have to be good. Just write something and just try and make it. And it could be a 60-second film. And again, looking back, I reckon, wish I had done like a 60-second short film just to whet my appetite, just to kind of like get a bit of experience and start building those sort of people around me and things like that. Because it's now, it's not that I'm getting old, I'm not at all, but at the same time, I feel like I've been...
I see a couple great
That's the 2 kids. It wasn't there 2.5.
Seriously, I know the feeling all too well. I've got 2, but mine are a bit older now, and I promise you, all of these, they seriously, they just suddenly showed up. So suddenly you have the kids, and lack of sleep for 2 kids in a row just does it.
Exactly. But I actually say, funny enough, like everyone says like having kids and stuff like it sort of slows you down or takes something. it actually made me much more efficient. Like
Right.
my whole life now has to, those moments that you get at time, I'm never lazy with it, because you can't be. When you got kids, the moment you get like a fraction of something, you need to make the most out of that time. And I think now, like, I know how important that time is, and I sort of make the most out of it. And I think, you know, there's lots of people who say, you know, it's a different, having kids can be a big change, but I think I'm trying to embrace the positive of it. And I think the positive, obviously, their kids are amazing. I love them to bits. But at the same time, it's just like finding the time is harder, but the time I do have becomes much more meaningful. So like, I think there's a really nice, I feel like hit a nice sweet spot. I mean, in the last 2 years and 6 weeks, I've made obviously 2 babies and a short film and
it's a lot of it's a lot of giving birth to things.
It is, yeah, a lot of firsts. But I think the whole thing is just make stuff and worry after whether people will like it. Be less concerned about. I think the best people in life are the ones who make stuff for them and don't make it for trying to impress loads of other people. Because, like, you know, that's genuinely why a lot of, like I said, was trying desperately to sort of do well in awards in some ways, and probably in hindsight, it was trying to be an award-winning something or other. But in its essence, I'm now looking forward to going, would I have done that differently? Would I have made that weirder? Could I have done this and could I have done that? And I think I'm taking those learnings onto the film. I think the biggest way of summating that is do it for you. Like, just make stuff and do it for you. Yeah. And don't worry about what other people think. Because then again, like, you know full well from everything, is that film festivals are notoriously a bit fickle, and you can do really well in one time and do really one thing, and there's no major rhyme or reason in some ways. It's a little bit right place, right time, a little bit of like little this and that. So like trying to do a short just to do well, and I'm not saying that's what I did, but I'm just saying trying to do that. I'm not saying that's not the way forward if you want to be.
I mean, doing a bit of homework's not a bad idea. No. I mean, I like your idea of saying, hey, I have this story idea, I want to make it. I'm going to look at which festivals it did well. Yeah. But you didn't do that while you made the film. You made that when the film was done. It's like, okay, well, this is my movie. Now I'm going to try and figure out how to get it. I mean,
that's probably the advertising side of me. That's like finding my market. That's like...
but you got to do it. I mean, people should watch your stuff too. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do it for them, but once you've got what you've got, find the people who like the stuff.
Yeah, you're right. I think you're right. It's in the making. Yeah. Don't try and impress people. Don't try and do. The more you do things like that, you end up. And advertising is a very, very clear way of showing that. Is that you can be left with something very vanilla if you listen to loads of people, board members and clients who want this. Oh, can you just chip away at that? And I mean, someone described it as you make your sculpture, however pretty it looks, it's your sculpture, and then someone chips away at it, and you're kind of left with this like Frankenstein at the end, and you just can't really associate it with what you made at the beginning. And I think that what happens with ads on a very quick scale and a very short scale, like a 30-second ad, and you can see it kind of unfold in your eyes. With a short film, I think, what's that? It's Death by a Million Cuts or 1,000 Cuts. It's the same analogy, and I think like that's very, it's like very prevalent with shorts, especially, but I think you're in much more of a control seat, and I think you're the client in some ways. But I think sometimes you can often forget that, and you try and please too many people and do things, and you're like.
Well, I think in my experience, what the tricky thing is especially with a short film, the good thing is that it's not a commercial product, so you don't have to sell it to anyone or anything like that, and you can find your niche audience wherever it is, whether it's a festival or something. You know? And you don't have to modify the film to satisfy the whatever, so that's not necessarily the case. But a feature film is a commercial project. And in my experience, what the real trick is do you you have to listen to the feedback, right? Like a film is a collaborative effort, and so listening to people's voices can be really helpful. They might point out stuff to you that you might not see, because especially in a feature, because if you're doing so long, you can get really tunnel vision. It's really, really bad. So having people tell you stuff is worth listening to. But I forget who said it. I think it was either Neil Gaiman or was it Stephen King? It was one of a very, very established writer who basically said, when it comes to your story and the story you're telling, get advice about what's wrong, don't get advice on how to fix it.
Yeah. That's
you
true.
know, because they'll never know how to fix it. They didn't design the thing. They don't know what, if compared to architecture, they don't know what pillars are structural or anything like that. So don't take the advice on how to fix it, but take the advice on what's wrong, and then you have to fix it.
Yeah, that's great advice.
And that, I find, has worked fairly well for me so far. You don't get to have that a lot of times, because if you do something commercial, the client's paying for it. If they say, sorry, dude, I don't want that, then you don't have much choice. You can huff and puff as much as you like, but the client is the one with the bills, and the bills pay. And if you want to get paid, you do what the client says, you know. But, I mean, with every commercial I've done that we delivered, I have my cut.
Of course.
And that I put in my show.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? And that's... So this
cool.
is... Okay, clients, here you go. This is the thing you wanted. I made it the best way I could possibly make it for you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep doing that, because that's what you want. You're paying for it. You're hiring me to help you. But I'm still going to...
I think...
I'm going to have my little thing. I'm going to have here, and they have to ask me, oh, you made a so-and-so commercial. I was like, yes, I did. This is the one I made.
Yeah, this is the one.
It's not the one I delivered. It's the one I made.
Yeah.
You know? So it seems to me that in order to be creative, in order to be in a team, there seems to be a weird balance of self-deprecating, self-criticizing insecurity, combined with a naive self-delusion that you're good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And these seem to, I don't know how, these seem contradictory, but I feel like as a director, you may need both. And I'm wondering if you have an idea of where you hover sometimes. Because I find myself hovering between them.
Yeah.
And I know when I'm in one and when I'm in the other. I'm wondering if you've ever sort of thought about it in those terms.
No, definitely. I think every director, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I'd love to know, like, what the sort of, the auteurs of the sort of directing, how they think. Do they straddle that line? Do they sort of think, or do they just go, they're in a delusional world and that's what makes them great? Like, in a great way, like, to be completely delusional and go, I'm fantastic at what I'm doing and this is how I'm going to do it, is brilliant.
Right.
But to do that is slightly borderline.
Well, you need enablers to get to that point, right? I mean, like, somebody needs to keep telling you, yes, you're brilliant. Yes, you're brilliant. Just do whatever.
But then how? They must have a vision that, if you look back, I'm often, again, that shows sort of my sort of like digging into the past. I will find a director I love and I will hunt everything they've done. I'll do sort of a deep dive on everything, and I go back and I start going back to their like first shorts and stuff. And sometimes it unravels and makes me feel really good, because I'm like, okay, they started off here and they ended up here. But a lot of the time with these ones, like, the Yorgos Lanthimos, then there's some really sort of like those kind of iconic directors and sort of things like that. They were brilliant from the get-go. Yeah. And I want to know where they sit on that line, because, is it a case of going that they were just so adamant that they knew what was right? They were in that delusional world that they just went with it. Mm-hmm. And then they had enough people, like you said, who sort of said they were great. But I almost think that those people, they were told they weren't great, they would have still carried on doing what they were doing, which is interesting, because you will meet people, and I've had people who love, like I said, and then I've had people who've written a review on some part of a film festival who said it's awful. Do you know what I mean? And you get that kind of thing, and it does knock your confidence, but you learn to take the good bits and the bad bits. But these people who do that, they don't seem to straddle that line. They seem to be far on this bit of delusional brilliance.
At least to the outside, right? So that's why I'd love to have them sit right here.
Yeah, please. Like, much more interesting than me.
But just to find out. Like, this is always this thing. I always find, like, every person I speak to, there's always this, because to my mind, the people that are too self-delusional, especially too early, most of their work sucks. Yeah. Most of their work is terrible. Yeah, it's indulgent. Exactly. You need to have a certain amount of self-deprecating criticism to be able to take the feedback and make it useful.
I'm a biggest critic by far, and I think if I wasn't, like, and I do think I straddle that line. I think you said hover. I think straddle is probably my I'm like, you're having them both. I'm gonna write them all. Yeah, exactly. Right. But I think I do think that I do think that I'm definitely more and more do stuff. The more and more I feel, again, I actually think the more and more I trust my own opinion, and I think I'm learning that again. That's kind of why when I said that bit of advice is that it's just gotta make stuff and try not to do it for other people, because again, yes, you're right. You can go into an indulgent world and end up with some garbage, and that's sort of not what shapes you. But I think I don't know. The more and more I'm listening, like I said again, it was really an interesting one from once we had the edit in place. There was an edit where that bit at the beginning where he's on the phone went on for maybe 3 or 4 times longer than it did.
Right.
And I had so much negative feedback about that. Like it was saying, "Oh, I got the idea. You landed it. Why did you continue it?" Blah, 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 blah. I had 1 or 2 people who specifically said they loved that part of it because of things. And then in the cinema, when we played it at the festival, the biggest laughs came from that frustration, that knowing frustration of someone being on the phone, being like, "Oh yeah," and being on hold. And so part of me goes, did I miss a trick there? And should I have listened to those people? But I think I ended up listening to me. And I think that's when you said you take the bits and you take the criticisms and not how to fix it. And I think I did that. And I think we ended up in a really nice place, and there's a nice rhythm to it. I wouldn't change that. Mm-hmm. But it is to the point where now I'm like, on the latest thing we've done, a lot of people said, "Oh, that went on for a bit too long," or "That was a bit this." And I went, "Nope." I was like, "It's good." Right. And it wasn't like an arrogant thing. It wasn't like a thing. It's like, I feel like the way you're going to make, yes, I might be wrong.
Right.
But I would rather try and, put out that, I think.
Stand by it, right?
Exactly. And, I hope I don't fall into a disillusional shape of garbage that,
the industry has a really, really good way of hitting you hard when you do.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like,
so you're only as good as your last bit of work. And I think, I do think though that the next bits of work I do will be a bit more challenging deliberately, because I want to push the boundaries and I want to go, how far can I push it before it breaks? And maybe it has to break, and maybe that's when I can learn more. I think that's what shorts are for, right? Like, making the short that's to be a great. No one really wants to be the best short director in the world. Like that's not a thing. You want to make shorts so then you can make a feature. Like it is a stepping stone. Like because you're not going to make money from making shorts. However fantastic, shorts don't pay. They are, they're either used as an exercise to help you build your tone, your style, whatever it is, or I don't even know. That's what they're used for, right? If they're not used for that, then you're kind of making, again, like I think that's where I look back at I look back at Yorgos's first short film, and I think to myself, he made something which felt like an experiment, but it felt like him. Yeah. And I feel like that's where I'm like, oh God, like really envious of that. Like it literally amazing. But then you see others who definitely went through the process of finding their voice and finding the style. Yeah. So I think there's yes, sometimes you might be one of those people who are delusional but also brilliant. Yeah. Or you might be one of those people delusional and crap. Yeah. But and maybe
until you get through it, you don't know. Right?
Exactly. And again, that comes back to making it. If you don't get making stuff, you're never going to figure out what's what. And I think
just go for it.
Yeah, because that's it. Find your voice by making. You can't find your voice by sitting in a room saying, "I've got this really great idea for a short film." It's or whatever. It's just go make it.
Thanks very much, Jolyon.
Thank you very
much. I said it wrong again. Oh, no.
One job.
I had the one job.
We talked about this before.
Apologies now. Right. Thanks very much for coming down. Pleasure. I really, really appreciate it. And it was a pleasure meeting you, and it was a pleasure watching you film. And thank you for sharing your journey with us. It was great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Cheers.